Hey guys! Tonight we're going to dive into something truly ancient, truly fascinating, and surprisingly slow. Imagine a world where your smartphone clock means absolutely nothing. Where GPS is just a series of really confident birds. Where the very concept of minutes or seconds hasn't even been dreamed up yet. We're stepping back into ancient Egypt, not to talk about mummies or pharaohs, well, maybe a little, but to understand something far more fundamental: how they told time. You probably won't survive a single day without your digital clock, frantically searching for a power outlet for your sundial. So prepare to unwind, as we discover a civilization obsessed with the sun, the stars, and the subtle dance of shadows. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes, not to the blare of an alarm, but to a gentle, golden light filtering through the papyrus screen covering your doorway. The air is still, carrying the faint scent of warm dust and the distant, rhythmic creak of a water wheel. It's just before dawn in ancient Egypt, somewhere around 1500 BCE, and the very first stirrings of the day are unfolding around you. You're not worried about hitting snooze. There isn't one. Your morning routine, like everything else in this land, is guided by the most reliable clock of all, the sun. As the sun begins its slow ascent, painting the eastern sky in soft oranges and purples, you're already aware of time passing, not by numbers, but by the subtle shift in light and warmth. This is the world you inhabit now, a world where the sun isn't just a source of light and life, but a meticulously observed celestial timekeeper. Your ancient Egyptian neighbors are stirring too, not rushing, but moving with a quiet purpose, their figures silhouetted against the brightening horizon. You can hear the distant bleating of goats, the soft murmur of voices, and the gentle whisper of the wind picking up from the desert. There's a certain peaceful inevitability to it all, a rhythm that has played out for millennia. The earliest, most mainstream historical fact about ancient Egyptian timekeeping is that they were among the first civilizations to divide the day into smaller, measurable units. Long before the Roman Empire was even a glimmer in someone's ambitious eye, Egyptians had established a 24-hour day. Pretty standard stuff, right? Except they did it without any of our fancy gear. Now, for a quirky tidbit, historians still argue whether the earliest Egyptians actually tracked exact minutes or seconds, or if their divisions were more symbolic, tied to religious rituals and agricultural cycles. It's easy to assume they had the same precision as us, but imagine trying to measure a second with a stick and a shadow. Sounds like a delightful way to develop a nervous twitch, doesn't it? So, you emerge from your modest dwelling, maybe a simple mud brick house, feeling the first warm kiss of the sun on your skin. The air is dry and warm, promising a long, bright day. The shadows are long, stretching out before you like sleepy giants. And it's these very shadows that will be your first true guide to the passing hours. Welcome to a day measured by the light itself. As the sun continues its slow, majestic climb above the eastern horizon, you instinctively seek out the first, simplest form of Egyptian timekeeping, the shadow clock, or as the Egyptians called it, a gnomon. Imagine a world before wristwatches or glowing digital displays. Your trusty gnomon is just a simple, upright wooden stick, or perhaps a small stone pillar, strategically placed on a flat, well-lit surface. It might be set in the courtyard of your home, or perhaps you pass by a larger, more official one near the village square. The sun casts its long, dark shadow, and as the sun rises higher, that shadow begins its slow, predictable dance, shortening and shifting across a marked surface. You watch as the shadow shrinks, moving steadily across lines etched into the stone or wood. These aren't just random lines. They're meticulously calibrated markings, often dividing the daylight hours into 10 or 12 segments. Early in the morning, the shadow stretches far, a long, slender finger pointing westward. As the sun gains strength, the shadow retreats, becoming shorter and moving towards the north. It's a very visual, very intuitive way to tell time. You don't need to read numbers. You just need to observe the shadow's position relative to the marks. It's a bit like watching paint dry, but with the added excitement of knowing exactly when it's time for, well, whatever ancient Egyptians did after their morning meal. Probably more work. The mainstream historical fact here is that the earliest known shadow clocks date back to at least 1500 BCE, from the reign of Thutmose III. These weren't just sticks in the ground. Surviving examples, like one found in the Valley of the Kings, show L-shaped or T-shaped blocks with a raised bar that cast a shadow. Pretty advanced for just telling time by the sun, wouldn't you say? It's like going from a sundial on your lawn to a full-blown observatory, almost. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Some of these ancient Egyptian shadow clocks were actually designed to be portable. Imagine carrying your timekeeping device with you, like a tiny, very slow GPS. You'd position it according to the sun, and poof, you'd know if it was time for your break or if you still had 3 more hours of lifting heavy things in the relentless sun. Sounds like a great way to cheat on your work hours, if you could just get the foreman to look away from his own shadow clock. Historians still argue whether these portable gnomons were common among the general populace or primarily used by priests and scribes for specific tasks. Did the average farmer really carry one, or did they just rely on the collective wisdom of the village elders' squint? It's easy to picture everyone with their own little time stick, but the reality was probably a bit more communal. As the morning progresses, the light intensifies and the rhythm of the village picks up. The air fills with the sounds of daily life, the distant shouts of vendors, the chatter of neighbors, the rhythmic thump of a weaver's loom. And all the while, the shadow of the gnomon continues its silent journey, a steady, unwavering testament to the relentless march of time, measured by nothing more complex than the sun itself. It's a beautifully simple system, isn't it? Almost makes you want to throw your smartphone into the nearest nilometer. Almost. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, casting its golden rays directly overhead, you begin to experience the inherent challenges of timekeeping with a simple gnomon. The morning's long, distinct shadows have now shrunk, becoming short and stubby, almost disappearing entirely. This is the notorious noon problem of ancient Egyptian shadow clocks. At midday, when the sun is at its highest point, The shadow cast by an upright stick becomes incredibly short, sometimes just a tiny dark smudge at its base. You squint up at the blinding sky. The heat is growing intense, shimmering off the dusty ground. The once crisp lines on your gnomon's base are now almost swallowed by the bright light, making it difficult to read the exact position of the shadow. It's like trying to find your keys in a sunbeam, technically there, but utterly inconvenient. This isn't just a minor inconvenience. For the Egyptians, whose lives were meticulously structured around the sun's cycles, this midday ambiguity was a significant issue. How do you declare the true noon when the shadow has seemingly vanished, taking the concept of an exact hour with it? The mainstream historical fact about this midday challenge is that the Egyptians often designed their shadow clocks with a slightly angled base or a specific orientation to maximize readability during different parts of the day. Some later versions even incorporated a horizontal bar on top of the vertical gnomon to cast a more discernible shadow, even at noon. It's like adding a little visor to your sundial, just to help it see better. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Historians still debate whether the ancient Egyptians simply accepted this midday ambiguity as a natural part of their timekeeping system, or if they had alternative, less documented methods for determining the precise high noon. Perhaps they relied on the general feeling of the sun's heat, or the position of a specific star that became visible in the fading morning light, though this seems unlikely for true noon. Or maybe they just decided that midday was whenever everyone felt hungry enough for lunch, a surprisingly reliable method across all civilizations, wouldn't you agree? Scholars still argue whether the apparent loss of the shadow at noon was considered a design flaw or an intentional feature, signaling a period of rest or transition. Was it a moment of no time, a brief pause in the relentless march of the sun? Or simply a really annoying design constraint they couldn't quite get around, like trying to build a pyramid out of wet sand? As the sun slowly begins its descent in the early afternoon, the shadows reappear, stretching out eastward once more, albeit now moving at a slightly different pace. The midday struggle for precision gives way to the more reliable, albeit still gradual, movement of the sun's shadow. You find yourself appreciating the longer, clearer shadows of late afternoon, a subtle nod to the wisdom of a civilization that adapted its tools to the quirks of its primary celestial timekeeper. It reminds you that even the simplest technologies come with their own unique challenges, and sometimes, the best solution is just to wait it out. Just like trying to get a toddler to cooperate, sometimes, you just have to wait for the shadow to move on. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of soft orange and pink, the simplicity of the shadow clock, while effective for daylight hours, becomes less reliable. And what happens when the sun dips below the horizon, or when the ever-present Egyptian sun decides to take a rare day off behind a veil of clouds? That's when the ancient Egyptians turned to a truly ingenious, and rather soothing, invention: the clepsydra, or water clock. You might be relaxing now, listening to the gentle hum of a fan, perhaps the distant sound of rainfall. Imagine that same consistent, rhythmic sound, but harnessed to tell time. That's the clepsydra. Picture a simple, elegant vessel, typically made of pottery or stone, shaped like a bowl or a cone. It has a tiny hole near its base, a perfectly calibrated aperture from which water drips out at a steady, unchanging rate. As the water level inside the vessel drops, it marks the passage of time against a series of internal or external scales. It's like watching a very slow, very precise leaky bucket, but in a good way. The mainstream historical fact about clepsydrae is that they were essential for measuring time during the night and on cloudy days when shadow clocks were useless. The earliest known water clocks date back to the 16th century BCE in Egypt. These weren't just simple buckets with holes. Some were quite sophisticated, with narrow tops and wider bottoms to ensure a more uniform rate of water flow as the pressure changed. It's a bit like designing a fancy teacup that always pours at the same speed, no matter how much tea is left. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Historians still argue about the exact method used to calibrate these early water clocks. Did they fill them and count the drips? Did they compare them to sundials during the day? Or did they just feel it, like a highly sensitive, water-based intuition? One popular theory suggests they calibrated them using astronomical observations, perhaps matching the water level to the movement of certain stars across the night sky. Imagine being the official water clock calibrator, meticulously counting drips under the silent gaze of the pyramids. Sounds like a great way to develop an appreciation for patience, or perhaps just a very strong bladder. Scholars still argue whether the exact duration of an hour, measured by a clepsydra, varied from season to season, or if they tried to maintain a uniform hour, regardless of daylight length. It's easy to assume they just kept things consistent, but the concept of fixed-length hours was actually a later invention. For the Egyptians, a night hour might literally be shorter or longer depending on the season, which could make your ancient Egyptian appointment book a little confusing. Meet me in the third hour of the night. Unless it's winter, then maybe the fourth? As the water in your imaginary clepsydra slowly, consistently drips away, the gentle sound becomes a soothing rhythm, a peaceful counterpoint to the quiet darkness. It's a reminder that even in ancient times, people found ways to measure the invisible flow of moments, not with a sudden digital shift, but with the steady, reassuring whisper of falling water. A truly refreshing way to track time, wouldn't you say? Especially compared to that whole sun in the eye thing. As the last golden embers of sunset fade from the Egyptian sky, and the gentle drip of your clepsydra marks the deepening twilight, a new set of celestial guides begins to emerge, the stars. For the ancient Egyptians, the night sky wasn't just a canvas for beautiful lights. It was a vast, rotating cosmic clock, meticulously observed and deeply integrated into their understanding of time. You lean back, perhaps on a cool mud brick bench in your courtyard, and gaze upwards. The desert sky is a breathtaking canopy of twinkling points of light, unmarred by the light pollution of our modern world. Here, without streetlights or neon signs, the stars don't just appear. They dominate, a silent, ancient spectacle. Your eyes begin to pick out familiar patterns, not just the Big Dipper or Orion, but constellations you've known since childhood: the hippo, the leg, the bull. These aren't just shapes in the sky. They are the markers of the night hours, moving with a predictable, majestic rhythm. The mainstream historical fact about ancient Egyptian star clocks is their use of decans. These were groups of stars or small constellations that rose above the eastern horizon at regular intervals during the night, each marking a new hour. The Egyptians divided the night into 12 decan hours, much like they divided the day. As one decan set, another rose, like a celestial relay race. This system was vital for telling time when the sun wasn't available, and it allowed for more precise measurements than simply halfway through the night. It's like having a dozen tiny, glowing alarm clocks scattered across the heavens, each one waiting for its turn to chime. Now, for a quirky tidbit, historians still debate which specific stars or constellations constituted the full set of 36 decans. There were 36 because they covered a full year, each decan ruling for 10 days, hence decan, from the Greek deca meaning 10. Many of these decans are no longer recognizable as constellations to us, as their names and groupings were unique to the ancient Egyptian astronomical system. Imagine trying to learn 36 new constellations just to know what time it is. Sounds like a great way to develop neck pain, doesn't it? And perhaps a very good excuse for being late to work. Sorry, foreman. The sleeping hippopotamus decan was obscured by a rogue sand cloud. Scholars still argue whether the decan system was primarily used for astronomical observations by priests, for calendrical purposes, or for everyday timekeeping by those who worked at night, like guards or bakers. It's easy to picture everyone in ancient Egypt having a detailed star chart, but the reality was likely more nuanced. Perhaps only the most learned few truly understood the intricacies of the full decan cycle, while the common person simply knew a handful of key stars that signaled the rough passage of time. It's a bit like knowing the time zones around the world, versus just knowing when your local grocery store closes. As you continue to gaze at the starry expanse, the rhythmic movement of the decans across the sky becomes almost hypnotic. Each star's slow, predictable ascent and descent is a quiet testament to the ancient Egyptians' profound understanding of the cosmos, not just as a source of wonder, but as an indispensable tool for ordering their world. It makes you feel incredibly small, incredibly still, and surprisingly ready for a long, deep sleep. After all, if the universe can keep such perfect time, why can't you just drift off with it? Beyond the everyday shadow sticks and the rhythmic drip of water clocks, time in ancient Egypt held a profound, sacred dimension, especially within the hallowed walls of its temples. Here, time wasn't just measured. It was observed, recorded, and interpreted by a select group of highly skilled individuals, the temple timekeepers, usually priests. These weren't just guys with a stopwatch. They were the guardians of cosmic order, ensuring that rituals aligned perfectly with the celestial movements. You imagine yourself stepping into the cool, shadowed interior of a grand Egyptian temple, the air thick with the scent of incense and old stone. Sunlight, once so vital for your gnomon, now struggles to penetrate the thick walls, creating an atmosphere of hushed reverence. In certain chambers, the light might strike a specific point on the wall only at a precise time, marking a significant moment for a ritual or offering. These were not accidents. They were meticulously designed astronomical alignments, built into the very fabric of the temple. It's like having a giant, very slow, and incredibly heavy cosmic alarm clock, perfectly synchronized with the universe. The mainstream historical fact is that Egyptian temples often incorporated sophisticated astronomical alignments, turning the very architecture into a timekeeping device. The Karnak temple complex, for instance, has several pylons and halls aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and the heliacal rising of certain stars, especially Sirius, Sopdet to the Egyptians, whose appearance heralded the annual flooding of the Nile, a lifeline for their civilization. It's like building your entire city based on a single, extremely important astronomical event. And they say architects don't have a sense of humor. Now, for a quirky tidbit, historians still debate the exact methods temple priests used to track time with such precision over centuries. Did they use highly advanced observational tools that haven't survived? Or did they simply rely on generations of meticulous naked-eye observation passed down through oral tradition and papyrus records? Imagine trying to align a massive stone temple with a star that only appears for a few moments once a year. Sounds like a great way to develop an unhealthy obsession with the night sky, doesn't it? And perhaps a permanent crick in your neck from all that stargazing. Scholars still argue whether the astronomical knowledge held by the priests was purely for religious purposes, ensuring rituals were performed at the correct divine moment, or if it also served a practical purpose for the general populace, aiding in agricultural planning. It's easy to picture the priests as isolated, mystical figures, but their knowledge often had very real-world applications. After all, if the priests messed up the timing of the Nile flood prediction, well, that's not just a bad day for the crops. That's a bad day for the entire kingdom, and probably for the priests too. As you stand in the imagined stillness of the temple, feeling the weight of millennia of observation and ritual around you, the concept of time takes on a deeper, almost mystical quality. It's not just about seconds or minutes. It's about cosmic cycles, divine harmony, and the slow, deliberate dance between the heavens and the earth. A truly timeless way to experience the flow of existence, wouldn't you say? Almost makes you want to apply for an ancient Egyptian priesthood. Almost. From the grand, astronomically aligned temples, our journey through ancient Egyptian timekeeping now takes us to a quieter, yet equally meticulous, corner, the scribes' chambers. These weren't just fast typists of their day. Scribes were the record keepers of everything, including the passage of time itself. Their chambers, often cool and quiet, were the hubs where the abstract flow of moments was translated into tangible records. You imagine yourself in a small, well-organized room, the air smelling faintly of papyrus and ink. A scribe sits cross-legged on a mat, a wooden palette of pigments beside him, a reed pen held delicately in his hand. His gaze is fixed on a scroll unrolled before him, filled with hieroglyphs flowing in elegant columns. He's not just writing down lists of grain or royal decrees. He's diligently noting down observations of the sun's passage, the stars' movements, and the readings from the water clocks. Each stroke of his pen is a deliberate act of capturing time, freezing it on the page for future generations. It's a job that requires infinite patience and a very steady hand, certainly not for those of us who get impatient waiting for a web page to load. The mainstream historical fact about scribes is their crucial role in developing and maintaining the Egyptian calendar. While not strictly a time-telling device for daily hours, the calendar was their overarching framework for organizing time across days, months, and years. They tracked the 365-day calendar, which famously included 3 seasons: inundation, growth, and harvest, and an extra 5 epagomenal days for festivals. This sophisticated system allowed for meticulous planning of agriculture, religious festivals, and state affairs. It's like having a giant, very accurate, and extremely official wall calendar that dictates your entire civilization schedule. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Historians still debate whether the Egyptian scribes' astronomical observations were precise enough to detect the minute discrepancies in the 365-day calendar, which is slightly shorter than the true solar year. Imagine trying to figure out leap years without a computer, just by watching stars and drawing lines on papyrus. Sounds like a great way to develop an unhealthy relationship with mathematics, doesn't it? And possibly a permanent ink stain on your nose from leaning too close to the scroll. Scholars still argue whether the scribes kept these detailed time records purely for the state and religious institutions, or if common people had any access to or understanding of these complex calculations. It's easy to picture the scribes as an elite, secretive class guarding arcane knowledge, but their work ultimately affected everyone's daily life, from planting seasons to festival dates. Perhaps they had simplified versions of their records for the masses, or maybe the average Egyptian just trusted that the scribes knew what they were doing, like trusting your tax accountant to sort out your finances. As the imaginary scribe meticulously forms another hieroglyph, the quiet scratch of his pen on papyrus becomes a soothing backdrop to your mental journey. It's a testament to the human desire to impose order on the chaos of time, to capture its fleeting essence in tangible form. You feel the gentle rhythm of his work, a steady, deliberate pulse that helps you drift further into the stillness. While pharaohs had their elaborate timekeeping temples and scribes their meticulously recorded papyri, the vast majority of ancient Egyptians, the hard-working farmers, experienced time in a far more organic and less precise manner. For them, the rhythm of life wasn't dictated by shadow plays or dripping water, but by the most ancient and powerful clock of all, the majestic Nile River and its annual floods. You imagine yourself as a farmer, somewhere along the fertile banks of the Nile. Your hands are calloused, your skin tanned by the relentless Egyptian sun. Your day, your year, your very existence, revolves around the predictable, yet awe-inspiring, cycle of the river. The mainstream historical fact about this is the vital importance of the Nile's annual inundation, or flood, which determined the three main seasons of the Egyptian calendar: Akhet, inundation; Pere, growth; and Shemu, harvest. These weren't just names for months. They were entire chapters of life, dictating when you planted, when you harvested, and when you simply waited for the life-giving waters to recede. It's a bit like having a giant, very slow, and incredibly muddy alarm clock that only chimes once a year, but when it does, it changes everything. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Historians still argue about whether ancient Egyptian farmers had very localized, traditional methods of estimating smaller time increments within these large seasons, perhaps by the position of certain trees, the calls of specific birds, or even the shadows cast by familiar landmarks in their immediate vicinity. Imagine trying to tell time by the sound of a grumpy camel's stomach rumbling. Sounds like a great way to develop an unhealthy relationship with your livestock, doesn't it? Or perhaps just a very strong sense of when lunch is approaching. Scholars still argue whether the concept of exact hours was truly relevant to the daily lives of most peasants, or if their days were simply structured by tasks and sunlight, from time to milk the goat, to time to collapse after working in the fields. It's easy to project our modern obsession with minutes and seconds onto them, but for a farmer, knowing it's the third hour might be far less useful than knowing the sun is high enough to start watering the flax. As you mentally observe the Nile, slowly swelling with the promise of new life, you feel the profound connection between the land, the river, and the passage of time. The gentle lapping of the water against the banks, the subtle changes in the river's level, the arrival of migrating birds. These are the natural indicators that mark the rhythm of your world. It's a beautifully simple, organic way to live, isn't it? A life where time isn't a relentless rush, but a patient, flowing river, inviting you to simply drift along with its ancient current. Almost makes you want to trade your digital watch for a really good mud calendar. Almost. While the common farmer lived by the rhythm of the Nile and the changing light, the upper echelons of ancient Egyptian society, the pharaohs and high-ranking nobles, enjoyed access to more elaborate and, dare we say, slightly less muddy timekeeping devices. These weren't just about telling time. They were symbols of power, order, and divine connection. You envision yourself now in the opulent chambers of a high priest or perhaps even a minor pharaoh, the air cool and still, scented with expensive resins. Here, time isn't just a practical necessity. It's a meticulously managed resource for rituals, decrees, and perhaps even for deciding when to politely dismiss a particularly long-winded courtier. The mainstream historical fact is that more sophisticated timekeeping instruments, often made from alabaster, granite, or highly polished wood, were found in elite contexts. These could be larger, more intricately carved shadow clocks for royal courtyards, or exquisitely designed water clocks with additional features, perhaps even small floats that indicated the hour by rising or falling in the water. It's like having the luxury edition of time, complete with extra engravings and probably a much smoother drip. Now, for a quirky tidbit, historians still argue about whether these elite timekeeping devices were purely functional or if they served a significant ceremonial purpose. Imagine a pharaoh checking his fancy water clock before making a grand pronouncement, ensuring the moment was cosmically aligned. Sounds like a great way to add extra gravitas to your daily schedule, doesn't it? Or perhaps just a very elaborate excuse for being late to a meeting. Sorry, the sacred alabaster hour bowl was having a moment. Scholars still argue whether the pharaohs truly understood the deep astronomical principles behind all these devices, or if they simply trusted their priests and artisans to provide them with perfectly calibrated symbols of order. It's easy to picture the pharaohs as all-knowing rulers, but even they relied on specialists. After all, you don't typically see a pharaoh up on the roof at midnight, squinting at the decans with a papyrus scroll. That was for the paid professionals. As you mentally observe these grander timekeeping instruments, perhaps a polished gnomon casting its perfect shadow across a mosaic floor, or a water clock gently gurgling in a quiet antechamber, you feel the subtle power of precision. Time, for the elite, was a tool to be wielded, a reflection of their control over the earthly and perhaps even the celestial realms. It's a reminder that even the most universal concepts can be shaped and adorned to reflect status, isn't it? Almost makes you want to commission your own personalized sundial made of solid gold. The ancient Egyptians, masters of organizing life, naturally extended their meticulous timekeeping to the very end of it, death and the afterlife. For them, eternity wasn't just a vague concept. It was a continuation of time, meticulously prepared for, down to the final ritual. You imagine yourself in the cool, silent depths of a tomb, the air still and heavy with the scent of natron and embalming spices. Here, time isn't measured by the sun or water, but by the slow, deliberate progression of rituals designed to ensure a smooth journey into the duat, the Egyptian underworld. The mainstream historical fact is that timekeeping principles were deeply integrated into mortuary practices. The journey through the afterlife was often depicted as a timed progression, with the deceased needing to pass through various gates or challenges within specific hours of the night, guided by spells and instructions from funerary texts like the Book of the Dead. It's like having a very complex, very long, and incredibly serious itinerary for your eternal vacation. And you thought airport security was bad. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether the hours of the night depicted in some funerary texts were literal time segments or more symbolic representations of stages in the soul's journey. Imagine trying to explain to Osiris why you're late for your judgment because your spiritual water clock malfunctioned. Sounds like a great way to stay stuck in a very awkward limbo, doesn't it? And perhaps develop a profound appreciation for promptness, even in the afterlife. Scholars still argue whether the detailed timekeeping for rituals in the afterlife was primarily meant to reassure the deceased and their family, or if it was truly believed to have magical efficacy, influencing the actual journey of the soul. It's easy to picture the Egyptians as blindly superstitious, but their approach to the afterlife was often pragmatic and highly organized. After all, if you're going to spend eternity somewhere, you want to make sure you arrive on schedule, right? As you mentally observe the careful preparations, the wrapping of the mummy, the placement of amulets, all performed with a precise, unhurried rhythm, you feel the profound respect for time, even beyond the earthly realm. The silence of the tomb is punctuated only by the soft rustle of linen, the gentle murmur of prayers, and the steady, unseen march of moments leading towards eternity. It's a reminder that even in death, time continues its gentle, unending flow, inviting you to release your worries and simply drift into the great unknown. A truly timeless way to consider the end of things, wouldn't you say? Almost makes you want to book your own afterlife tour. Almost. Beyond the grand cycles of days, nights, and seasons, ancient Egyptians sometimes delved into surprisingly granular ways of describing time, using units that might seem utterly baffling to our modern, stopwatch-obsessed minds. You're about to encounter a truly quirky aspect of their timekeeping, where the abstract flow of moments was sometimes measured in terms of fingers. You imagine a very patient Egyptian, perhaps a craftsman or a builder, attempting to convey a precise moment to a colleague. Instead of saying, "Meet me in 5 minutes," he might have gestured to the shadow. The mainstream historical fact is that one of the more unusual, yet recorded, units for measuring short periods of time using shadow clocks was the finger of shadow. This referred to the apparent movement of a shadow over a distance roughly equivalent to a finger's width on the scale of a sundial. It's a very visual, very direct, and frankly, rather imprecise way to measure a brief moment. Imagine trying to explain to your boss why you're late because you miscalculated a finger of shadow. Sounds like a great way to earn a very unimpressed glare, doesn't it? Now, for a quirky tidbit. Historians still argue about how universally applied these finger of shadow measurements were. Was it a common colloquialism, A bit like saying, in a jiffy, or was it a more formalized unit used by specific professions, like builders measuring the progress of construction throughout the day? It's easy to picture everyone in ancient Egypt carrying a small ruler in their pocket to measure shadow fingers, but the reality was probably far more organic, relying on experienced eyes and a shared understanding of what a finger of time truly felt like. Scholars still argue whether this finger of shadow truly represented a consistent unit across different sundials and locations, or if it was highly variable, depending on the size of the gnomon, the time of day, and perhaps even the mood of the person doing the measuring. It's easy to assume they aimed for absolute consistency, but the fluidity of their day might have allowed for more flexible interpretations. After all, if your finger is slightly wider than mine, does that mean I get to go home earlier? This could lead to some very polite, but very persistent, ancient Egyptian arguments. As you mentally attempt to measure time by the subtle creep of a shadow across your own imagined finger, you feel the gentle rhythm of a past where precision was less about fractions of a second and more about the observable, tactile world. It's a reminder that even the most abstract concepts can be grounded in the simple realities of human experience, isn't it? Almost makes you want to abandon your digital watch and start carrying a small, well-manicured finger with you everywhere. Almost. While the ancient Egyptians were pioneers in timekeeping, many of their ingenious devices have, well, simply vanished. Unlike massive stone monuments, intricate papyri, or the very persistent pyramids, the everyday tools for tracking time were often made of perishable materials like wood, clay, or even just the ground itself, leaving historians with frustratingly few direct examples. You imagine yourself as an archaeologist, carefully sifting through the sands of time, hoping to uncover a perfectly preserved ancient Egyptian sundial. But what you often find instead are fragments: a broken piece of marked stone, a few scattered ceramic shards that might have been part of a water clock, or perhaps just a curious depression in the earth that could have been a gnomon base. The mainstream historical fact is that while we have depictions of these timekeeping devices in tombs and temples, the actual surviving physical examples are relatively rare compared to other artifacts. It's like trying to reconstruct your entire childhood from a single blurry photograph and a vague memory of a really good sandwich. Now, for a quirky tidbit, historians still argue whether some of the lost timekeeping devices might have been so simple and ubiquitous that they left almost no archaeological trace. Imagine an ancient Egyptian peasant just using a specific rock and a line drawn in the sand to tell time. Sounds like a great way to avoid paperwork, doesn't it? But also a terrible way to leave a clear record for future archaeologists. Perhaps the very elegance of their simplicity contributed to their disappearance from the physical record. Scholars still argue whether the lack of certain types of timekeeping instruments implies they were less commonly used by the general populace, or simply that the materials they were made from didn't survive the harsh climate and millennia of neglect. It's easy to assume that if we haven't found it, it didn't exist, but the desert has a way of swallowing up anything that isn't made of solid stone. So, maybe your average Egyptian wasn't just relying on the sun. Maybe they had a collection of very fragile, very biodegradable time-telling devices that have simply returned to the earth. As you mentally sift through the imagined sands of Egypt, searching for these elusive timekeeping tools, you feel a gentle sadness for the knowledge lost, but also a quiet appreciation for the ingenuity that existed even without leaving permanent marks. It's a reminder that not all of history's brilliance is cast in stone. Sometimes, it's just a whisper carried on the desert wind, inviting you to let go of the need for perfect clarity and simply drift into the unknown. Almost makes you want to start making your own biodegradable clocks. Almost. Having explored the intricate ways the ancient Egyptians measured time, from shadows and water to stars, it's worth pondering how these methods actually wove themselves into the fabric of their daily lives. How did these unique clocks shape everything from breakfast to bureaucratic meetings? You imagine yourself living in this ancient world, where precision as we know it is a distant dream. Your morning begins not by the precise beep of an alarm, but by the subtle, gradual lengthening of shadows from your doorway, indicating it's time to rise. The mainstream historical fact is that daily routines in ancient Egypt were heavily influenced by the natural light-dark cycle and the seasonal changes of the Nile. Your workday, whether you're a farmer in the fields or a craftsman in a workshop, would likely be structured around the sun's journey across the sky. The shadow's position on a gnomon would tell you when it was time for a break, or when the long, hot midday sun demanded a period of rest. It's like having a very slow-motion, nature-driven work schedule, where your boss is literally the sun. Now, for a quirky tidbit, historians still argue about how rigidly these hours were followed by the average Egyptian. Did they clock in and out with absolute precision, or was there more flexibility, especially for agricultural work that depended on unpredictable factors like weather and the river's whims? Imagine trying to fine a farmer for being late when his water clock got clogged with a rogue beetle. Sounds like a great way to inspire a very polite, but very firm, ancient Egyptian labor dispute, doesn't it? Scholars still argue whether the concept of dividing the day into fixed hours, each being 1/12 of daylight or night, meaning their length changed with the seasons, led to a different perception of time's flow compared to our modern uniform hours. It's easy to assume time felt the same to them, but perhaps the longer hours of summer daylight felt subtly different from the shorter hours of winter. This might have led to a more fluid, adaptive relationship with the passing moments, less about strict punctuality and more about alignment with natural rhythms. As you mentally transition through an ancient Egyptian day, guided by the sun's silent journey and the water clock's gentle drip, you feel a profound connection to a world where time was less a tyrant and more a guide. The rhythm of life was slower, more deliberate, allowing perhaps for a deeper appreciation of each fleeting moment. It reminds you that sometimes, letting go of precise schedules and simply flowing with the natural pulse of the day can be surprisingly liberating, wouldn't you say? Almost makes you want to smash your alarm clock with a ceremonial. Despite the apparent simplicity of their timekeeping methods, a fascinating scholarly debate persists regarding the true accuracy and widespread application of ancient Egyptian clocks. Were they truly precise scientific instruments, or more pragmatic, approximate guides for daily life? You imagine a bustling marketplace in ancient Thebes, where a scholar from our time attempts to verify the exact time using a dusty old gnomon. The mainstream historical fact is that while Egyptian timekeeping systems were remarkably innovative for their era, the precision we associate with modern clocks was largely absent. Sundials and water clocks, while functional, were subject to environmental variables like cloud cover, dust storms, and temperature fluctuations, which could affect their accuracy. It's a bit like trying to set your watch by a really enthusiastic, but slightly unreliable, rooster. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether the apparent inaccuracies of some ancient Egyptian clocks were seen as flaws, or simply accepted as the natural imprecision of time itself. Imagine an ancient Egyptian getting genuinely upset because their gnomon was a finger off. Sounds like a great way to develop an unhealthy relationship with sunshine, doesn't it? Or perhaps just a very polite, ancient Egyptian shrug. Scholars still argue whether the concept of a universally standardized hour existed across all regions and social classes in ancient Egypt, or if time was more localized and flexible. It's easy to assume a monolithic approach, but a farmer in the Delta might have perceived time differently than a priest in Karnak. Did they care if their shadow clock was a little off compared to the official temple clock? Perhaps not, if it still told them when to stop working and eat their lentils. As you mentally delve into these scholarly debates, you feel a gentle ripple of curiosity, recognizing that even the clearest historical facts can hold layers of subtle interpretation. The exactness of ancient Egyptian time may remain a topic of discussion, but their enduring ingenuity in attempting to measure the immeasurable is undeniable. It reminds you that sometimes the most profound insights come not from definitive answers, but from the quiet questions that linger in the shadows of history. A wonderfully soothing way to contemplate the mysteries of the past, wouldn't you say? Almost makes you want to join an archaeological dig just to measure ancient shadows. Almost. As our journey through the curious world of ancient Egyptian timekeeping gently draws to a close, you're left with a profound sense of a past where time wasn't rushed, but flowed with the natural world. It wasn't about deadlines or alarms. It was about the sun's steady climb, the gentle drip of water, and the silent dance of stars. You now understand that for the ancient Egyptians, time was a cyclical, ever-present force, woven into the very fabric of their lives, from the daily rise and fall of the sun to the grand, life-giving inundation of the Nile. The mainstream historical fact is that their timekeeping methods, while seemingly simple to our modern eyes, laid crucial foundations for future civilizations' understanding of calendars, astronomy, and the division of the day. They didn't have atomic clocks, but they had a deep, intuitive grasp of cosmic rhythm. It's like building the first very basic, very reliable bicycle, long before anyone even conceived of a sports car. And they did it all with sticks, water, and a lot of patience. Now, for a quirky tidbit. Historians still argue whether the Egyptian obsession with the afterlife and eternity contributed to their unique, almost relaxed, perception of earthly time. Imagine thinking of your daily life as just a very long, very leisurely prelude to an even longer, even more leisurely eternity. Sounds like a great way to avoid stress, doesn't it? Perhaps that's why they built so many things to last forever. They literally had all the time in the world. Scholars still argue whether the cyclical nature of their time, tied to the Nile's flood and the sun's cycles, made them less focused on linear progression or progress, as we understand it. It's easy to assume all civilizations strive for constant advancement, but perhaps the Egyptians found perfection in repetition, in the enduring rhythm of the cosmos. After all, if something works for millennia, why change it? As the imagined echoes of ancient gnomons and water clocks fade into the quiet hum of your own room, you feel the calming influence of a past where time was a gentle guide, not a demanding master. It reminds you that sometimes the most profound forms of organization come from simply observing nature's patient, unwavering flow. It's a testament to human ingenuity and our enduring quest to understand our place within the vastness of existence.